Hi there! Previously, I mentioned being able to use Nintendo's Game Boy Advance emulator in a modified version of Nintendont to save game progress directly to the storage device. Using this emulator seemed like a good alternative for some GBA games that still play a bit slow on the homebrew emulators. But some of the quirks that I noticed in this emulator didn't seem to be present in Nintendo's other iteration, which is Pokémon Box. In Pokémon Box, there is no frame judder. If you've ever used or heard about the Game Boy player, then you probably know about this problem already. The version used for demos runs at the speed of the Game Boy Advance, resulting in the aforementioned frame judder. Here's my idea. What if I could find the absolute final version of this emulator, hoping that the fix from Pokémon Box made its way into one of the demo discs? There's a lot of them around. I checked over 50 different demo or promotional discs, and I found 12 versions of the Game Boy Advance emulator. To my surprise, however, they weren't all that different. The cool thing about them though, is that many come with a customized screen border. Here's a quick look at all of them being played on console.
F-Zero Blind App. You've got a new booster.
Hey!
Mario vs. Donkey Kong.
Something else I was hoping to find were any fun or interesting commercials for games in high quality. A lot of the TV spots you find on YouTube are usually in low quality. If you know me, I consume media at large. I have most of my DVD collection on the Wii, including a TV show collection, music videos from the 80s, all the way to third generation K-pop with a little bit of J-pop, Mandopop, and even Japanese theatrical stage plays based on manga and video games. It's only natural to take it a step further and start checking out some cool commercials, right? But yeah, I couldn't find too many interesting ones. Notably, I found a TV spot for Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, which features a song by Aiko. Aiko's music is typically not featured in anime or games, so she doesn't have much presence outside of Japan. Her last music video was only a few months ago, and one of her concerts is currently on Netflix, which is kinda random. I also found quite a few commercials for the Touch Generations line, featuring Utada. Easy Breezy being quite the underrated classic. Everyone knows this. And you have a GameCube commercial with Ichiro Suzuki. Now that's cool. Where's Otani with the Switch commercials, Nintendo? These are all pretty good. Most of the other ones I found were for peripherals, like videos explaining how Donkey Konga works, or commercials that only show gameplay or CGI scenes. Demos for GameCube games were a lot less interesting to me, but something that stuck out is that many of the advertised games are from anime, with Naruto having the most demos and curiously even Zatch Bell having an unexpected amount of demos. In the end, I wasn't able to find a build of the GBA emulator with the fixes from Pokémon Box. But that's okay, because I've found ways to fix it by modifying the emulator's code. In fact, I've built quite the list of patches, not just for this emulator but also for Pokémon Box. These patches are made to be used for my version of Nintendont. All you have to do is place it on the same directory as the game, and you can edit the patches to your liking. But remember, these patches were all tested on the version of the emulator used in Interactive Multigame Demo Disc version 16. To set it up, extract the emulator's TGC file in Dolphin. Then you can extract the contents of the TGC file. You should see a files folder and a system folder. Rename the files folder to root. Here you can place the patch file and data.sav to properly enable saving. Here's what you can do on the Game Boy Advance emulator. First, the global timer. This value controls the frame time in milliseconds. It's originally set to the GBA's frame rate. If you change it to match the GameCube's frame rate, the video becomes perfectly smooth, but after some 10 minutes or so, the frame pacing breaks for some reason. That's why I have this, block on VSync. This patch replaces the timer-based synchronization system with VSync, and it's what I'd recommend using if you want to get rid of the frame judder. This one is a bit more complex. Basically, when you save in games that use the maximum save file size, like in most Pokémon games, and then you immediately exit or reset, then there is a high chance that the save data isn't correct. This new code hooks into flash handling and makes sure to flush the data so that when the ARM CPU reads it from RAM, it is 100% complete. Yes, you must flush the flash. Change pixel format. This is the other quirk that Pokémon Box doesn't have. The pixel format of the frame buffer is set to RGBA 6, and this features a pretty noticeable dither effect. But if you play with composite cables, especially on a CRT, the extra detail makes the image look pretty bad. Changing the format to RGB 8 removes dithering and gives you a more stable image. The dark filter. This is a color masking setting for the game's texture object. It's set to darken by around 20% the red, green, and blue color channels. It uses the same amount as every other variant of the emulator, and it's also used by the Game Boy Player startup disc. To restore the original color, simply change it to the maximum hex values. You can also lower the red channel to make it perfectly and incandescently warm. Frame blending filters. The Game Boy Player startup disc has a setting called screen filters. First, you have sharp, which doesn't do anything special. Then you have soft, which blends the current frame with the previous one. This is the most commonly used filter. It's in the MGBA Wii port, it's used by the Game Boy games in Kirby's Dream Collection, and it's also used in Pokemon Channel's Pokemon Mini emulator. Then you have normal. This one is basically a clever way to blend the previous frame only when the colors flicker continuously. The cool thing about this one is that it's supposed to give you the advantage of the soft filter without adding motion blur to the entire image. The problem with this one is that it tends to trigger in situations where it shouldn't. And this filter is the one used in every variant of the emulator, and it's also in Pokémon Box. But the code isn't identical. There's a slight difference in the normal filter used for demos compared to the one in Pokémon Box and the Game Boy Player startup disc. Well, it turns out that the soft and sharp filters are also implemented in Nintendo's emulator, but with no way to select them. With this patch, you can have free control and pick whatever filter you want. Scaling and bilinear filtering. As is the case with many re-release games on the GameCube and Wii, it's not unusual for these titles to use bilinear filtering, resulting in blurry visuals with only a few cases looking more acceptable where the developers pre-scale the image first before applying bilinear filtering. Luckily, this emulator happens to pre-scale the game's image, so by looking for the pre-scaled texture object and enabling the bilinear filter, we can get a very nice result that really outshines some of those old re-releases. And since you can change the horizontal and vertical positions as well as the width and height, it's possible to set any zoom level you want, and even widescreen correction. That's it for the general purpose Game Boy Advance emulator. Let's look at the patches for Pokémon Box. First, the big one. This is the code that helped me fix Adventure Mode in Nintendont. By modifying only 5 instructions, we can go ahead and indulge in the world of Pokémon. But what's the point if you can't save your progress? That's why I have this. Save file loading works by patching the emulator to copy an unused area of RAM to the spot where the active save file is. By using my modded version of Nintendont, this area will store the save data if the save file is found on the storage device. So when the game starts, the current save file will be available to the game. For save file writing, it works in a similar way. Every time the game updates the active save data, it's also copied to the unused area. When you exit the game, this area is saved to the storage device by the ARM CPU. Something to note is that Pokémon Box uses the gender specified by the player to show a different screen border. This functionality is broken due to the way I load save data. So to show the yellow border, you have to use a specific patch for it. The PAL version of Pokémon Box contains 20 different ROMs covering 5 languages for both Ruby and Sapphire, as well as the newer revision for each and every ROM. Since it was no longer a matter of porting over my changes and things now required testing and making new code, it took me quite a bit to get everything working for the PAL version. But now everything is supported. If you want to load Sapphire's second revision in Spanish, you can do it pretty easily. And that's it for the patches. As you may have noticed, the screen scaling code is missing in Pokémon Box. But honestly, you might as well embrace the screen border since it's the best way to show off this weird method of playing Ruby and Sapphire. The Game Boy Advance has an unusual behavior when software reads a null pointer. Nothing happens. But in this emulator, it jumps to the emulated address 0, which is the GBA BIOS. If you play a game and it randomly goes to the GBA boot animation, this is most likely the reason. It's usually easy to fix. Sonic Advance 2 is one such game where it swaps to null when switching sprites in the ending scene, making it impossible to finish the game. The decompilation project for this game actually documents this issue because compiling the game for PC as it is would simply result in a crash. To implement the fix on the US ROM, I've made an assembly patch to handle this without recompiling the game. I also added a Patek's Golden Sun based audio mixer which actually fixes the audio pops and techno bassist music. And finally, I use a program called Custom 1M Patcher by Lesser Kuma to modify the saving system. This allows saving in all the Sonic games. For saving in the Tiny Chao Garden, I use a patch similar to the one I used for Pokemon's Flash code. Basically, I grab the updated save data from the GBA's internal work RAM and put it in the active save data, and this seems to work. Of course, the reason for wanting to support the Tiny Chao Garden is that I want it to be compatible with my Chao Transfer Tool, a project I started back in 2018 and hope to eventually release. For Nintendont, there was one more feature that I wasn't able to get working, until now. One of the things you can do in Pokémon Box is take a picture during gameplay. This picture is stored in memory as a CMPR texture, so I wanted to save it to the storage device as a way to give some purpose to this option. While you can display it using Wii Explorer, it wasn't a proper image format usable in other places. So, I wondered if I could implement a complete screenshot feature. The answer is yes. It works by using the Wii Remote. You press home and B at the same time and it converts the current image and stores it in Mem2, also known as the extra RAM of the Wii. When you exit, it will check if there's a saved screenshot in Mem2. If there is, it's copied to the storage device as a BMP file. The Wii Remote must be connected as a controller. If it's not, simply wait for it to time out, then turn it on again. If you want to retake the screenshot or avoid saving it, you must press home and the minus button. And you can use Wii Explorer to convert the BMP file to JPEG so you can display it on the Wii's photo channel. Taking multiple screenshots proved to be too unstable, though it should be possible to improve it in the future. Well, that's it. I tried experimenting with a patch that allows going into the box mode in Pokémon Box because it was reported that selecting an option called Go to List will always crash the game. Beyond that, I haven't been able to do much since this kind of crash is difficult to fix without a USB gecko. I'll be sharing this additional patch in case someone out there is interested in getting this fixed. I think I'm forgetting one more thing. What was it? Oh yeah, like, comment, and subscribe.